Hello everyone, I'm Nirmal, currently doing my PhD in TU Delft. Today I'm going to present our paper titled Note the Highlight, Incorporating Active Reading Tools in a Searches Learning Environment. Now I'm aware that I have thrown a lot of words at you, but not to worry, we are going to cover each of these concepts individually while we go through the presentations. So what's in the agenda for today? So we are going to cover two main concepts with regards to our work, and then we are going to dive into a quick demo of our interface and then discuss our results and future work. So first, what is searches learning? Say I want to write an essay on genetically modified organisms. Now, living in this current age and time, I would probably go to the web and query what is genetically modified organisms. Then I'm gonna probably look for documents, read them, and if I'm not satisfied with the information that I'm getting, I'll probably read more. Maybe I find some new information and then I'm gonna reformulate my queries, and I'm gonna keep exploring until I'm satisfied with the knowledge that I have learned or gained about this particular topic. But we must have often realized that this searching and exploring process while trying to learn something is not very simple. For example, if we want to know today's weather, we find that very quickly. One of the reasons for that is today's web search engines, they are designed for relevance, but they are not so much tailored for learning purposes. Say, when a user wants to go to the web and explore for some information with the purpose of gaining knowledge. Holding that thought in mind, in the next section I would introduce a concept known as active reading tools in educational literature. So what are these tools? Active reading tools like a highlighting tool or a note-taking tool is something that's used for text comprehension by learners. For example, highlighting is used for text selection, and note-taking is used for organizing the selected bit of text. And it has been shown in educational literature that using these tools actually help up in the learning process. But most of those work in education has been done when the learners are just learning from one document, which naturally begs the question, what happens when the users also have to search for information other than just reading from one document? They also have to search and explore. So that's why we were naturally interested in the question, do these tools also help in the searches learning context? Do they help the learners learn, or do they form a distraction, these tools, while they're trying to look for information on the web? So we have these two research questions that we address in this paper. The first one is we simply look at to what extent incorporating a highlighting and note-taking tool in the traditional web search interface helps in learning compared to the conventional web search interface where we don't have these tools. And the other research question that we are very interested in answering in this paper is, given once we incorporate these tools in the traditional web search interface, how much do the search behavior of the users vary? Do they make more queries? Do they make less queries? So these are the two questions that we are interested in our work. And now I would like to talk about how we operationalize these tools for our experiments. So for that, I would like to give you a quick live demo. For our experiments, we use SearchX. It's a web search interface that has been developed in our lab at Delft. And if you go to this link, you can take part in the demo by yourself. But nonetheless, I would run through the demo once during the presentation as well. So this is how SearchX looks like. As you can see, it represents a traditional web search engine or interface, but we have incorporated a built-in highlighting and note-taking tool on this. So for example, once the users open a document and they want to select a bit of text and highlight it, they just have to mark it like this and it's highlighted. They can select or highlight multiple text, they can delete the highlights, and they can also just select without highlighting if they press the deactivate button here. Once they have highlighted some bit of text in the document, it comes up in this list here, so that they can click again and then the document is loaded with the highlights already there. We also built the note-taking tool on this search interface, so it's here on this button, and if we click it here, it opens the note-taking tool and we can take note while searching. We can also open a document, deactivate the highlighter so that we can just select a bit of text without highlighting, copy it, and we can simply paste it in the notepad as well. So these are the functionalities of our highlighting and note-taking tool that we built on top of a conventional web search interface. Now that we gave a demo, now we would like to dive deep into our experiments and results. So for the experiments, we employed 115 participants from Prolific. It's a crowdsourcing website, and we paid the participants £7 per hour. Our experiments took about 45 minutes to finish. And since we had two different active reading tools, so we had 4 experimental conditions. First one is a control experimental condition where the participants did not get either of the tools. So this represents the traditional web search engine where we don't have any of the tools. And then one experimental condition is where the participants only have the highlighting tool. The third one is where the participants only have the note-taking tool, and the last one is where the participants have both. To evaluate how the learning process of the participants when they're searching, we used two learning-oriented search topics. One was genetically modified organism and the other is urban water cycle. We borrow these from two previous literature on searches learning. So one participant just gets one topics assigned to them. To measure how much a participant has learned during the search session, we use two different kinds of tasks. One task is a vocabulary test, so where they have to learn the meanings of certain words with respect to the topic that they're searching for. So this is a low-level learning task because they simply have to learn the meanings of certain words. And we quantify the knowledge gained by an unit known as RPL, which measures the knowledge of vocabulary terms that was acquired relative to the total possible amount of learning. Which means that if in the beginning, which means before the search session, if the participants knew say 3 out of 10 words, and after the search session they now know 6 out of 10 words, so this means the RPL is 3 by 7 because they learned 3 new words where they could have learned 7 new words. So this is how we quantify the knowledge gain in the low-level vocabulary task. We also employed a high-level task, which was essay writing, where the participants had to just write an essay after the search session. And to evaluate the essays, we borrowed 2 metrics from a paper by Wilson and Wilson. The first metric is known as F-fact, which basically counts the number of facts that the participants have written in their essays. The second metric is called T-depth, which basically checks how many subtopics pertaining to that topic has been covered in the essay. And the last metric for essays, we employed Flesh Core using Python library. Flesh Core indicates how complex the text of that essay has been. Well, as we can guess, the first 2 metrics are needed some manual annotation by the authors. So we divided the essays among us and we manually annotate manually counted the number of facts in their essays and manually checked how many subtopics each essay covered. And then we found an inter-annotator agreement of 0.78 for T-depth and 0.76 for F-fact, which showed us that our assessment of the metrics and the essays are in line with each other, and we could go to the observations. In the results, we saw that having the highlight or the note-taking tool does not really help in the low-level vocabulary learning task. We did not see any difference in those participants compared to the control group of participants. However, participants with the highlighting tool, they significantly covered more subtopics in their essays compared to the control group, whereas participants with the note-taking or the notepad, they wrote significantly more facts in their essays compared to the control group, which indicates that highlighting and note-taking might have some positive benefits while they're writing essays. Also, we saw that the participants with just the note-taking tool, their essays were significantly more complex than participants who had both the highlighting and the note-taking tool. To see some behavioral difference, we first saw that the highlighting and the participants in just the highlighting and the highlighting plus note-taking interface, they spent significantly more time reading documents. So they opened the document and they were reading the documents significantly longer than the other experimental conditions. They were opening and they were highlighting, so they were spending more time reading the documents. Since they spent more time reading documents, they actually explored less document snippets. So they scanned less snippets on the search interface compared to the control group of participants. And lastly, we also saw that the control group of participants, they viewed significantly more documents than the rest, which indicates that having these tools sort of makes the participants explore less documents when they are introduced in the search interface. However, having the highlighting tool makes them read more, spend more time reading a particular document. We also saw that the participants in just the note-taking interface, they spend the least time reading documents. So what they were doing was they were opening a document, reading, and then closing it, and then taking in their notes. And we also saw that 86.2% of the participants took notes in the note experimental condition compared to 52% of the HIGH+NOTE. So having both the highlighting and the note-taking tool made them take less notes. They were focused more on the highlighting of documents, which is interesting for future design of these tools. So participants in the note interface, they also wrote more notes, and they also copied a lot of their notes into the essays that they wrote after the search session. And this is compared with the participants who had both the highlighting and note tools on their interfaces. In general, we saw that the participants from their self-assessment considered the standalone interfaces, which means the interfaces which just had the highlighting or the note-taking tool, to be more easier to use and more useful than the interface which had both of them together, which indicates that maybe increasing the complexity of the search interface might not be a good idea for the future. Now, moving into conclusions and future work. To answer our first research question, we saw that highlighting or note-taking did not help the participants in the vocabulary learning task. However, highlighting helped cover more subtopics in their essays, whereas note-taking helped write more facts in their essays. And having both the highlighting and note-taking tools did not help in any of the tasks. Whereas answering the second research question, we saw that having access to active reading tools, we saw significant change in search behavior. For example, participants with a highlighting tool, they spend more time examining documents, whereas participants with the note-taking interface, they spend less time taking documents but more time taking notes. For the future, there are 3 in interesting future directions which researchers can dive into. First is what different kinds of highlighting and note-taking strategies exist and how does these strategies affect the learning outcome. The second one is, can search behavior moderated by the presence of these tools, can they be predictive of knowledge state of a user? Can we say how much knowledge does a user have on a particular topic based on their search behavior? And the last one is if we can take these highlights and notes to understand what parts of documents are relevant to the users in this search learning context, which gives us much more insight into this complex concept of relevance in information retrieval. And since we are decent researchers, we already tried to answer the first future work direction, and we have published it in ECIR. Check out the proceedings for later. And with that, I would like to end this presentation. Please, I would be glad to take any questions and for further discussions on our work. Thank you.